Good morning, sir. Today's question was asked by one of our prospective customers. The question is, I do not have documentation done. Can I get started with the software project?
Yeah, first of all, Guhanesh, good morning, and thank you for asking that question. And so first, I think I should explain what is documentation, because I'm not sure if all the viewers would understand what this customer actually mentioned. So what happens is, when a software is prepared, it is crucial that the entire software requirement is clearly defined. It is well documented. So what happens is, there are various documentations that are prepared before the software even starts. We develop the software. Like, for example, there is a elaborate process of requirement gathering that is done. There are use cases that are mentioned. That is, how does each of the stakeholder or each of the user of the software, how would they interact with the software? There's a very elaborate documentation called use cases that is prepared. And features, what are the different features that are available from the software, that is written down in a very elaborate manner. Even they go to the extent of even putting flow charts. That is, what happens as a process flow. What is the first step, then what is the second step, what are the different approvals that are there, what are the different controls that are there, even to the extent of what validation to keep for each of the input element or the software item that gets into the software for interaction. Every single item is captured in a very detailed documentation. And one other very important thing is also timeline. What will be the timeline? What will be the time required for requirement gathering, then for the UI UX discussions and development, then for the back-end team and the front-end team to develop, and then testing. Like that, there's a complete timeline that is mentioned. So what happens is, this process of complete documentation can last for anywhere from few days to few months. If it's a project which is very large, let's say a 2 or 3 year project, a very large project, the requirement gathering stage or the documentation stage itself can last for 2 to 3 months, or maybe even more. And in that stage, not even a single line of code is written. Okay. So what happens is, when there is a project where the documentation is prepared completely, that entire process where there is a team of individuals involved in preparing the documentation and flow chart and all the timeline execution and everything, that process adds on to the budget of the project. Okay, so that's not done for free. Okay, that's not something like a pre-sales activity. It's actually post-sales activity, which involves a kind of cost. So what happens is, many of the small and medium businesses, they cannot afford this added budget into the project. And their projects might not be so big, so large, that we need to go with this entire elaborate, requirement gathering or a process documentation stage for a small and medium business. It might not really required, because the scope of the project itself might not be that large. So that is why, for the last 13 years, what we've been doing is, we've developed this unique approach called collaborative development methodology. So what do? We first take the pains, or we do our best to understand what is the outcome required by the customer. What does the customer really want? What are the challenges that they are facing? What are the problems that they are facing? And how can a software solution help them to mitigate those problems or to remove those problems? So with that clarity of what is really needed by the customer, what we do is, we start the project. We may just have what are the features that we intend to bring into the software. That is all that we may have. And that process might even take just few minutes of interaction with the customer. Maybe about half an hour of interaction with the customer, we get all the requirements, all the features that need to come out of the software. And with that, our development team starts off. And as we keep developing, there is an ongoing interaction that happens with the customer, where we develop and a feedback is sought from the customer, and we keep in mind of what is the outcome that is required, and automatically the software development leads to that particular outcome. So we avoid this entire additional cost burden that is involved in preparing a detailed documentation for something where the scope is very less, where the project itself is a small project. So to answer your question, I do not have documentation, can I get started with the project? If it's a very, very large project and the project is running into crores, multiple crores, then it is better to get through the process of documentation, a very detailed documentation. It's better to invest 2 to 3 weeks time or 2 to 3 months of time and get the whole documentation done. But if the project is a smaller one, which is just in few lakhs, it might not really be required to have that detailed documentation because the cost involved can go up. And it might not really add value because anyway, we have this collaborative development methodology, which takes care of, focusing on the outcome and what is needed. So the answer is both yes and no. It depends on the size of the project and how the customer would like to, whether the customer would like to add on to that budget or not. So I hope I've answered the question, Ganesh.